Welcome to Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner. This is Tour de Suisse 2022 Stage 5. Now it's 190 kilometer stage. They're going to drop down a big descent to begin with, and then it's going to start getting really hard with the last 80 kilometers to go because they're going to have some steep, hard climbs on a circuit of about 27 kilometers. That has 3 climbs on there. Now, each of the climbs, the 2 main ones anyways, that are KOMs, are under 3 kilometers and around 8%. We're in Switzerland. It's going to be narrow roads, narrow climbs, narrow technical descents, and we're going to be in the city. So at times there's going to be some sharp, hard turns with buildings set up all over the place, 180-degree turns. It's a dangerous course whenever you're racing in the city of Suisse. Now, when we get into the racing proper, we automatically see that, of course, the biggest story of the day is COVID. COVID has hit on Stage 5 Tour de Suisse. It's Jumbo-Visma's gone. DSM are going to lose a couple riders. And InEOS are going to lose a vital rider because Adam Yates is going to be out of the race too here on Stage 5. That's going to change the dynamics of the race because remember, Jumbo-Visma's not here. Sepp Kuss would have been really showing more on tomorrow's stage over the weekend when we get into the bigger mountains. But you got to believe Sepp Kuss was looking solid here at Tour de Suisse. Now, Adam Yates disappearing for InEOS Grenadiers. This is a big thing. InEOS Grenadiers in the team bus. They have to change the plans right now because Garrett Thomas, who was higher than Adam Yates on general classification, so you say, Chris, well, he was already a GC leader. That could be true at this moment in time. He may have already been decided to be the GC leader here on Stage 4, but I believe it was going to be Yates because we'd seen Garrett Thomas on Stage 1 working for Adam Yates often and doing more work throughout the earlier stages here before Stage 5. So keep that in mind. When you're Team InEOS and you have Danny Martinez and Tom Pidcock here, and you have the GC leader now, Garrett Thomas, they have to change their mentality a little bit for Team InEOS, but they still want to win here, right? It's Tour de Suisse, and we got the Tour de France coming up soon, so Team InEOS need to put on a show here, but COVID has hit hard. Now, when the race director's interviewed here before the race starts, this is important information that he has to say because he's talking about COVID still being around in the world today, which we all know it is, but we haven't seen it hit the professional peloton that hard like we're going to see on today's stage. And the race organizers explaining to everybody of how important it is still to stay sharp with your COVID protocols because remember, it's hard right now when it hits Jumbo-Visma and Team InEOS, but could you imagine if it hit the race organizer and their staff, the race would be done and the race would be over at this point in time is what the race organizer is saying. So he's asking everyone to be careful and don't forget COVID. Now, when we get into the racing, it starts, and right away there's chaos all over the place as a big group is coming out the back with race yellow jersey wearer Stephen Williams that's coming out the back from Bahrain victorious. We'd seen him crack a little bit on yesterday's Stage 4 going up that final KOM, but he cracks here. And the field, when we go back to the front sides of the field, it's still probably 70, 80 guys up there. So Stephen Williams definitely cracked here on Stage 5 of Tour de Suisse. Now up front, let's get to the action because who is going to take over the front if we lose race leader from Bahrain victorious Williams? Up front, when they cross the line with 2 laps to go still here on Stage 5, we see it really quick. It's UAE Team Emirates, Mark Hirschi's team. They're getting on the front. We'd seen a lot of energy, a lot of cooped up energy from Mark Hirschi on yesterday's final KOM when he was attacking, sending his teammates out the back. Now he's got all his teammates on the front drilling. I don't agree with this tactic. I understand why he's doing it. He's Swiss. He thinks he has some amazing form. But when you look at Mark Hirschi's resume, he's not really a GC rider. I know he's won stages in the Tour de France. I know he's gone great in the classics, won Flèche Wallonne. But have we seen him win a big individual GC race throughout the calendar year? I don't think it's there. So when UAE Team Emirates are riding right now, I don't believe this is a good tactic, especially when you still have InEOS. And let me remind you guys, Bora Hansgrohe have a stacked team here with Alexander Vlasov, who's already got multiple GC wins on his resume here on 2022. Egita's there on the general classification. Max Schachmann for Bora Hansgrohe, that'll put 3 up there in the general classification. And the only reason why Max isn't way up there on the general classification is because the crash that he had with about 4 kilometers to go on the Peter Sagan. Amazing victory here at Tour of Suisse. So when we're looking at UAE Team Emirates, I don't like it. I just see a team that's getting way too nervous. way too early here on stage 5. They're going to ride anyways. And then up front, we got 2 riders they're chasing because it's Alexander Kemp from Trek Segafredo up there. And then it's Sylvain Dillier from Alpecin Phoenix, who happens to be the Swiss Road National Champion. Those 2 riders got just over 3 minutes. I believe about 3:20 was their maximum lead. And now when we get more into these final circuits here, we're going to see Alexander Kemp, the Trek Segafredo rider. He's going to get popped back there. And it's going to be Sylvain Dillier that has to go solo with about 36 kilometers to go and still a lap and a half left here on stage 5. Behind, InEOS are going to take over the work because it's not going fast enough from UAE Team Emirates. So Dylan Van Barley from InEOS is on the front, starting to pick the pace up. He's setting a vicious tempo back there as we're starting to see the time gap drop steadily to the rider up front, Sylvain Dillier, who's still doing everything he can to hold off the peloton behind. With each lap passing, the peloton's getting smaller and smaller. And with 1 lap to go, about 27 kilometers to go, this is when the action's going to start getting hot and heavy here on stage 5, the final lap here of stage 5 Tour de Suisse. Now, next up, the team to pop on the front is going to be Israel Premier Tech. They're riding for Jakob Fuglsang. They only got 3 guys left in the race, including their race leader here, Jakob Fuglsang. I don't like this tactic either. Now they're going up the climb with about 22 kilometers to go. The first KOM climb here on the final lap. And it's Israel Premier Tech drilling it on the front. It's Chris Nealens on the front and Hugo Ull, the Canadian. Hugo Ull, man, are you climbing good. I haven't seen this out of you ever throughout your career. This is an impressive ride. I've seen him go good in the one-day races and occasionally getting in long breakaways. But riding at the front on stage 5 Tour de Suisse, dropping everybody out the back. Chris Nealens is doing a great job up front, and Hugo Ull, like I said, sitting second. So they'll go over the top of that KOM in the same order. And as they drop down the first KOM here on the last lap, it's Israel Premier Tech on the front still with 3 riders. Chris Nealens leading the way. And then we'll see Alexander Covey from UAE Team Emirates go down in the right corner. Looks like possibly clipped his pedal. No problem because he's not a big GC favorite here. But remember, he is Mark Hirschi's teammate. And UAE Team Emirates could use all the help from Mark Hirschi as they can possibly get here on stage 5. They'll drop down the descent, start heading through the valley. When they go up the next bump in the hill, it's not a registered KOM, but it's definitely a climb because nothing's flat on this final circuit. Remember, this is the circuit used in 2009 for the World Championships that Cadel Evans won. Now, we saw some great interviews with Philippe Gilbert talking about how, don't be mistaken, this is not a one-day race. The peloton is tired, it's been hot, it's getting hotter today, and so anything can happen on this race. When we see the next interview from Stefan Kuhn, he says the most important thing here is every rider's only going to have really one big attack in their legs, so you better use it and use it wisely. Now up front, let's get back into the action because it's 15 kilometers to go, and looking back, it's going to be Quick-Step's Van Wilder back there. Van Wilder's looking back, and if you see, it's his teammate right in front of him, Masnadov, so he must be looking back for Remco Evenepoel. Evenepoel's at the back of the group, and it's a small peloton at this point in time, filled with all the GC favorites still in the front group here with stage 5 to finish. Now Remco Evenepoel slots back up to his teammates, but they're at the back of the group. Up front, just as Remco Evenepoel is getting to the back, Chris Nealens from Israel Premier Tech, he was catching the last breakaway rider up front of Sylvain Dillier. We'll see him give the peace sign, and that's the end of his stage 5 as he drops back for Alpecin Phoenix. Up front, Israel Premier Tech's Chris Nealens is still driving it hard over this next bump. He'll go down the descent. Now, I said I don't like this tactic here from Israel Premier Tech, and I didn't like it from UAE Team Emirates, again, because I believe it should have been the other bigger teams chasing here on stage 5. Now, one other thing I left out, so I got to bring the film back just a little bit. There was a time bonus sprint somewhere around 38 kilometers to go, and it was Krohn and De Hent that took the time bonus sprint there, so that moves Krohn up highest on the general classification here for Lotto Soudal if he can get to the finish line. So up front, keep in mind, right now in the GC favorites, because Williams got dropped the highest on general classification, virtual lead or in the actual lead, depending on, it's a fine line here, how you want to look at it. It's got to be considered Lotto Soudal, Andreas Krohn, that's race leader at this point in time, because he's 2 seconds up on Geraint Thomas from InEOS. Now, with everything still together, Chris Nealens there drilling the pace on the front of the group. He's He's going to drop down the descent. I like being on the front for the descents because they're technical and dangerous, but I don't like the ideal still of Israel Premier Tech riding so long at the front. They'll come into the last final rated climb with 10 kilometers to go. Chris Nylans, who did a spectacular job on the front, he's going to blow from the front of the group. And then we're going to see Hugo Ull take over at the front. Hugo, man, I was impressed when you were just riding second wheel with your teammate back there early on this last lap. But now he's on the front, and guess who he's sending out the back? Remco Evenepoel's getting dropped back there. Thibaut Pinot's getting dropped back there. Hugo Ull, you got some magic right here, because no matter what happens on the rest of today's stage for the rest of your career, Hugo, you're going to be able to say, I dropped Remco Evenepoel, right? I remember when I was doing Tour of Suisse the year I won the jersey here on stage 5, I remember Jan Ulrich getting dropped, and I still tell people I dropped Jan Ulrich. So Hugo, no matter what happens, you drop Remco Evenepoel and Thibaut Pinot on this stage. Hugo Ull's throwing down the big effort on the front. The peloton of GC favorites is exploding everywhere. When we get up to the top, near the top of the climb anyways, it's going to be Luknesen DSM that throws in attack. Now, guys, I said yesterday I didn't like Mark Hirschi's attack with 15 kilometers to go on yesterday's stage, but I love this attack from Luknesen, because if he can get a gap, remember, this is not a stage like yesterday that just went into the last climb, finished up the KOM and had a 15-kilometer flat section all the way in the finish. This is a decisive stage. Anything can happen. If Luknesen can throw in a great attack, get a gap, drop down the descent, and there's any games being played back there, he can win today's stage. Only problem is Jakob Fuglsang's not having any of it. So right away doesn't even allow a gap to Luknesen's attack and takes over the front with about 250 meters to go on this final KOM. He'll go up over this KOM, just pulling all the GC favorites. Again, Fuglsang, I can't figure out your tactic here, because riding your team on the front instead of letting InEOS just do the whole job and keeping teammates with you for as long as possible seems to be the brighter ideal. But Fuglsang's got other plans. He's going to pull on the front for the final part of this KOM. And when we drop down this descent, it's going to be Max Schachmann and Vlasov on the front. Vlasov's going to open up a gap to Max Schachmann. As he gets a gap, Tom Pidcock back there from InEOS, he ain't sleeping on the job. He bridges across to Max Schachmann, and now Fuglsang's in trouble. He's got two riders up the road, both about 110 thereabouts down on the general classification. He's panicking back there and pulling all the GC favorites. He's in trouble. Remember, his whole team rode for no reason back there other than to make the race hard, which InEOS were already doing. Now he's on the front chasing. The only reason he gets any relief here is up front. Tom Pidcock knows not to take a pull with Max Schachmann, because Max Schachmann's won GC races and Tom Pidcock has not. So Pidcock's sitting on. Max Schachmann knows he's going to sit on him all the way to the finish. He sits up, and that allows the group to come back together. Luckily for Jakob Fuglsang, next thing to happen is all the group goes curb to curb, and now they're all looking at each other, playing some games back there, and then Vlasov's going to throw in attack, and Tom Pidcock is on it again. We go into the left corner, just under 5 kilometers to go. Vlasov sits up, and then Jakob Fuglsang gets a gift, the hand delivered to him here from the cycling gods, as he easily slides up the left side of the road and gets a gap on all the favorites behind. Now we see Fuglsang, he knows this is what he's been looking for. He's got the gap, he's going hard on the pedals, and we only have one more final climb up to the finish, 2 kilometers long here on stage 5. Behind chasing Fuglsang is going to be the three riders of Vlasov, Geraint Thomas, and EF Education. Nielsen Palace back there. If you guys remember right here on the butterfly effect, you go all the way back to stage 1 when he was attacking up that final climb with about 8 kilometers to go. I said on that stage, Nielsen Palace has to stay calm. He has to stop attacking before the finish and just follow the big name riders here at Tour de Suisse. Remember, Nielsen Palace won Classica San Sebastian, went 5th at the Belgian World Championships last year. And if you can go 5th at the Belgian World Championships in Belgium with that kind of a race, you know he's a player, but he's always attacking too early in the races. We've seen him many times in the Tour de France attacking and then coming up short in those long breakaways. Now now today he's finally racing the way I want to see him do, and he's sitting on Garrett Thomas back there when we start the climb, the last final climb with 2 kilometers to go. Up front, if Fuglsang still has a gap, but Vlasov throws in a massive attack and bridges across up to Fuglsang. Now just behind Garrett Thomas, bridges across just slightly about a second back behind Vlasov, and then Nielsen Paulus, who was wise to sit on the whole time from that 4.5 kilometers all the way to this final 2K. He's gapped off. Max Schockman has dropped his breakaway companion as he was chasing back there, and he looks like he could catch this front group of 4 up front. G. Thomas, Vlasov, and Fuglsang will play a little games. We'll see Paulus come back on shortly after that. Just about a second later is Max Schockman, the Bora Hansgrohe teammate of Vlasov up front. Once we near 1 kilometer to go, Max Schockman's going to test the waters with a short little tack, but it's covered right away. Vlasov's going to do a little testing of the waters, but that's covered right away. Now behind, we see the chase group behind, and it's Mark Hershey chasing these guys. Andreas Krohn, who could be race leader jersey at the end of today's stage. If he can get up to that front group of 5 up front, he could be wearing yellow at the end of today's stage, and they're just a few seconds behind. Max Schockman sees this, and he finally gets on the front with about 600 meters to go. It's time to sell out for Bora Hansgrohe's Vlasov. As Max Schockman gets on the gas, his teammate Vlasov opens up the gap, and it's going to be Jakob Fuglsang who has to close the gap again here on stage 5. As he's closing the gap, Max Schockman up front's going through the last and final hard right turn here with about 350 meters to go. Comes out of the turn with 300 meters to go, and he's throwing in with everything he's got. Fuglsang's locked on his wheel. Vlasov is right there. Garrett Thomas is sitting there, and last wheel is Paulus from EF Education. They still got a gap back to the other GC favorites, trying to get back up to this lead group of 5 up front. Now as Max Schockman starts to die, it's Jakob Fuglsang that takes over with about 250 meters to go. He starts his jump for the line to try to win here at stage 5. Vlasov starts passing Jakob Fuglsang. At the same time behind, it's Paulus passing Garrett Thomas, who's opening up a gap. Once they come out of the bend, Vlasov is accelerating hard, and he's gotten over the top of Fuglsang. Behind, it's Paulus passing Fuglsang. As they come with 100 meters to go, Paulus is looking fast and coming hard up to the wheel of Vlasov. 75 meters to go. Vlasov, Bora Hansgrohe, he'll look back one more time to see what's happening, and then he'll start to celebrate crossing the line as Paulus is throwing his bike, trying to get some kind of extra speed out of today's stage, but he'll finish second on the stage. Third on the stage, Jakob Fuglsang, Israel Premier Tech, who were super aggressive on today's stage. They'll pull out a podium. Fourth on the stage, Garrett Thomas back there for Team InEOS. So he's still up here as a big-time favorite to win Tour de Suisse. Remember, this boy can time trial like nobody else in this group can. Vlasov isn't that rusty, though. Fuglsang's not that bad. Nielsen Paulus, I don't know how he'll go, but he lost time on that stage 1 with that 8 kilometers to go being aggressive. Now, after the stage, when we're talking about the interviews, it's Nielsen Paulus that throws out a great interview. Congratulates his teammates for riding early in today's stage to keep that breakaway in check, and then helping him out here at the finish of the stage. Said he rode the very finish of the stage just like I wanted him to do, always following the GC favorites until the very end of the stage, and then capping off a chance of trying to win here at stage 5. Nielsen Paulus, that was an amazing job. You were racing spectacularly tactically wise here on stage 5, and absolutely deserved that second place, if not a win here on stage 5. But Vlasov was amazing too. He's been aggressive since stage 1 and has looked perfect throughout this Tour de Suisse. Now, Garrett Thomas has got to be one of the favorites if he can find a little bit tiny more form, or his time trialing abilities are up to par from what we're used to seeing in the past from Garrett Thomas, because Tour de Suisse here finishes with an individual time trial. Jakob Fuglsang's third place on today's stage. He was a little bit too aggressive for my liking for Israel Premier Tech overall here on stage 5. But he does have exceptional form. So when we start going into tomorrow's mountain stages, we got a big battle here because, of course, Mark Hershey was just close behind on the general classification here on after today's stage 5. So as these next 2 mountain stages starting here tomorrow and the next day, you know the racing here at Tour de Suisse is going to be fantastic. So make sure you guys like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next edition of the Butterfly Effect.